This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for downloading this edition of DocNJock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macron. Joining me, as always, my cousin Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Styling, profiling, cashing big checks. My man, what's happening?
I almost pooped myself before we got going. How can you style and profile with a brown streak up your back?
Adam's like, before we get started, and usually I'm the one that's like 5 to 7 minutes late every single time we record. I'm like, okay, 10 o'clock, and then I end up pushing the button at 10:07 because time, I just don't know how fast it's going. My goodness, you blink, you look for the equipment, you power everything up, you get through everything, you look on your phone, and 6 minutes passes. I'm like, oh my goodness, he definitely is aware that I'm late to everything. And this morning, he's like, I'm a little bit, kind of on my knees here. I can't get to the toilet. I got to figure this out. And I'm like, dude, are you Adam Strozinski or are you Lamar Jackson or something?
That's what it was, too. I pulled a Lamar. I was in the middle of getting everything set up for the show, and all of a sudden, you know how like when it hits, it's like, hey, you better get there right now. Otherwise, it's going to be all over yourself. And I was lucky. I was only like a mere 7 feet from my bathroom, so I was able to get in there. And it was just out of the blue, just like hit me over the head like it was like a brick. And all of a sudden, I was able to go get into the bathroom and take a massive dump. But I was sitting, I was like, oh my God, my stomach hurts. And I don't know why. All of a sudden, just insane. And I had a text you. I was like, hey, shoot for about 5 minutes after where we're going to record. And honestly, I could have probably have sat there for another 10 minutes. Once we get done with the show, I'll probably go back. I pinched it off real quick and got cleaned up so we could record.
Did you get an opportunity to take in the Monday night game? That was one of the classics. I thought it had a chance of being really good. Two teams playing really well. The heroics of Lamar Jackson, whether or not he was, forced to use the restroom and then come back. Bro, Cleveland took advantage. They came back, and then Lamar comes back heroically. It was one of the great games this year, and I'm so glad I got a chance when you cover sports and stuff to just sit back and, there's very rare times the kids just mind and they're doing their own thing and they're not bothering anybody. I got to watch the game. It was so entertaining, and it was like, wow, this is back and forth. This is what great football looks like, offensive back and forth, momentum swings, and then you look and you go, this is the Cleveland Browns? What the hell? Can the Detroit Lions ever play something like this? It was such a quality performance. I was so impressed. I was so happy.
Yeah, it was a really good game. The thing is, the last couple weeks, the Monday night game has been spectacular. And you couldn't say that a couple years ago. A couple years ago, the Monday night games were absolute trash. And this year, they've been super entertaining. This game specifically was an all-time great. This was a classic. Like every time you turned your head, it was almost like it was a lead change. Browns fought their way back, captured the lead. Next thing you know, Baltimore comes down, ties it back up, and then, Lamar Jackson puts on some heroics, whether he's pooping or not, whether he's got bubble guts or not, gets Justin Tucker in a situation where he can hit a monster field goal, and they end up eking out a win. It was such an entertaining game. Even the back and forth with the laterals, I mean, that was even entertaining. I feel bad for the bettors because that safety ended up knocking a couple people out because I believe the spread was 3 or 3.5, depending on when you got your bet in. But those final 2 points either won it for you or completely lost it for you. So I'm sure the bookmakers weren't very pleased about all of that. But either way, man, it was a fantastic ball game.
It was good to see. And then now, great new hope has occurred for the Detroit Lions. Something that happened in terms of a decision that many fans agree with, unifying. I think that when the news broke on Tuesday that Chris Spielman was hired, I think it was good timing, mid-afternoon, and they announced that Chris Spielman has joined the Detroit Lions as a special assistant to Rod Wood and to Sheila Ford Hamp. And I think it does a couple things. It kind of sends the message that, hey, yes, we are listening. We understand that, hey, we don't exactly understand what is going on in the world of football in terms of what we should be asking these GMs and the potential head coaches that could be brought on. And they acknowledge that, hey, this is a player Chris Spielman that has a history with us. He was on the team in 1991 that actually is the lone playoff victory that this organization has had in the modern era. So he understands, and he's somebody that kind of represents what Detroit's about. Hard-nosed linebacker, a thumper. I mean, someone brought up when I was talking to them, in a season had over 190 tackles. And if you think about it, that's averaging 10 tackles a game in a 16-game span. That's unheard of. And this is a guy that represents Detroit, understands in his broadcast career what good teams look like. He understands, in his conversations, how teams that play well and are assembled will look. So he's the voice. He's going to be the special assistant along with another committee made up of Mark Hollis and Barry Sanders. And they've established a decent committee of what's going to be. Now, I think it's fair. Remember, Chris Spielman's not going to be the GM. He's just going to sit in and he's going to be asking relevant questions about what these GMs are going to want to do, what their vision is, how they're going to assemble a team, what a roster looks like. So by and large, it's a good hire. I understand the other side of it where those go, wait a minute, this guy is, embodies what Detroit's about. He played his entire career, never won anything. And does he really understand what it takes to hire an individual to become management? He's never done it before. So they're paying him for his words and his advice, which I think it's valuable. I think that maybe the full-time status, maybe the role that he has might be expansive, but he did his shilling. Whenever he got a chance with that microphone at Fox, he was like, I think this is great. I think Jelani Tavai is going to be great. I think you got to be patient. I think Matt Patricia, it's about culture. It's about vision. You got to be patient. So people have called him out for his shilling, and we'll talk about that. But my initial impression is Sheila Ford Hamp, Rod Wood understand their limitations. And if you're going to go out there and pay a consultant, who better than somebody that at least understands the misery of the supporters and understands, hey, we want to build a strong, tough-nosed football team that can handle adversity and not wilt like whatever Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn tried to put together.
I mean, I think this is a fantastic hire. Look at it this way. This is a guy who has a ton of information. This is a guy who basically has been around the league. Yeah, he's had to shill for the team, but every announcer has to shill for the team. That's what they get paid to do. This is a guy who has been here through it all. And when this team was actually playing in playoff games, he was here. The one that they won, he was here. This is a guy who gets it. And his family gets it. You can look no further than his brother, who is the manager in Minnesota, who has put together a pretty good team. I think everybody would agree with the Minnesota Vikings. Rick Spielman's a hell of a GM. Hell of a GM. And you don't think that they don't get around the table at Thanksgiving, around the table at Christmas, around the table at birthdays? They don't talk football? This is a guy who eats, breathes, lives football. What you can't say about Sheila, what you can't say about Rod, is those guys don't eat, breathe, live football. This is a guy who's going to come in. He's going to give his opinion. He knows the league in and out because of his position working with Fox. He knows the league in and out for working with his position with Fox Sports Detroit here locally when they would televise the preseason games. This is a guy who is well-versed in the NFL. On top of that, he knows what's gone wrong here. Whether he shilled for them or not on TV is irrelevant. He understands the game. His family understands the game. You don't think that he doesn't know what's going on. Now, I don't think he's got the experience to be a general manager, at least not yet. He doesn't. But this is a guy who I think is incredibly apt at being able to give you an opinion on what you should be looking for with your GM. When you sit in on these GM meetings, asking the right questions, and then helping this board of trustees for the Detroit Lions come up with an actual solid pick for a general manager who can then go out and pick up a head coach who's going to help make a difference. I think this is some self-awareness by this new owner and by Rod Wood, by both realizing, hey, we don't understand what we're doing exactly with hiring a general manager. We don't understand exactly what we're doing in these meetings. We don't understand what we're actually looking for. So let's go out and let's get people who are close to this organization, people who want this organization to succeed, people who want to see us do well, and let's have them come in and give us their opinion and have them hold our hands and help direct us a little bit. And this is the one thing I don't like anything to do with the Ford family. I think they're horrible owners, and Sheila's included. And I know she's brand new, but I think what you're seeing a little bit of a difference between her and her old man, her and her mom. She understands that she's in over her head a little bit. So why not go out and get some people who understand what's going on? I think this is a fantastic hire. Like I want to know where you stand with the people who claim that he's a shill for the team and this is a bad hire because he said Jelani Tavai is going to be good and he said Matt Patricia's bringing some culture. I want to know your opinion on that because that really burns me up and it really kind of pisses me off and I want to have a discussion about that because I just don't understand how narrow-minded some people can be and how they just don't understand what is required of certain positions in the media.
Absolutely. But it's true that there's a certain level of trust that you want to have with the broadcaster because everybody sees it. Everybody knows that Jelani Tavai is not playing well. It's written about. He's playing too slow. It was quite obvious that Aaron Rodgers in the game against Detroit found and targeted Jelani Tavai when he was out there. That Tanyan touchdown was easy. Tavai just struggles in coverage, and he just doesn't belong out there. He's scheme-specific, and he doesn't belong out there. But yet, what happens is that you're absolutely right. I mean, it's straightforward. The reason why he does it is he has to establish a relationship with the people that he's going to walk into a locker room with. If you're going to go and you're going to be a big-time NFL broadcaster, one of the roles you got to do is during the week, you don't see it, but these announcers get to sit around table and get to have access to the players. And if you're out there calling out players in a way that's disrespectful, you don't get the access. It's just the way it is. So you don't really see a lot of big-time broadcasters just phrasing things in the way that beat writers or podcasters or media members will do. And yes, I don't think that some of the things that Chris Spielman said over the airwaves, if you played them back, are going to be like, why did you say that? But you know why he said it. He knew what was going on. It looks like he's been angling for this job for a long time. So is there a little bit of distrust because of what he said? Yeah, but do I understand it? Look, if Sheila was going to come calling and say, hey, Adam and John, we need you to kind of, we're going to sprinkle like a couple $1 million here, and you're going to be the official podcast of the Lions. Can you just start saying things? The tone of our talk may be, we'd have to have a talk and say, maybe we got to kind of do some shilling here on a certain level. But he was a player. He views things from a player's perspective, and no player wants to get blasted by the media. So they phrase things in a certain way. But the film doesn't lie. And so while people definitely have the right to call it out, I'm not upset about it in any way, shape, or form because of the fact that it's expected. There's a guy working for the Lions. I mean, and that's why, technically speaking, if he's getting compensated, and I guess a little bit of inside knowledge here, there's a word in the media that networks and media members ascribe to. So is there a true media in the big-time world? No, because the word is partner. And what does that mean? It means that the NFL and the Lions are sharing film with Channel 2. Dan Miller has a check from the Lions, and hence Dan Miller is employed by the Detroit Lions, meaning that, yeah, he's got his own company and things like that, and he serves a role, but he's honest and he's forthright. But, a guy like Jim Brandstatter was saying some things and they removed him. And that's why you have an individual in there now in Lomas Brown that's a little bit more team-friendly, a little bit more rah-rah. And so with these partner relationships, it lends to the ability to kind of say, okay, can you really be objective in everything that you're saying? Now, most of the media ask the tough questions, but you're not going to just go and say everything at the will because at a moment's notice, someone could call you and say, hey, you want 2 players after the game? You got to kind of tone it down, phrase things in a little bit different way. So there's a lot of partner relationships going on.
You can go back as far as any one of our podcasts with Dan Miller and listen to the questions that we ask him and listen how he answers. He does a really good job of being as forthright and as honest as possible without actually burying the team.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's
he's
that's
a complete professional about it. Like, we would get done with those interviews and we would just look across from the table from each other and we'd just be like, man, he's such a professional.
He's a pro.
Because he could have totally bagged on the team, but what he did was he gave you an honest, accurate answer in one of the most pleasant ways possible.
Exactly. And that's how you do it to keep your job. And unfortunately, that's kind of how it is now with media. And it's smart for the Lions to do that. You partner up with the networks and the radio, and you get the people, and that's why, boom, WJR gets the interviews with the coach. And that's why Channel 2 has an 11 o'clock show with 2 players on it afterwards. You have a relationship. But if you're going out there and being like, man, Reggie Reglings needs to get cut, like certain podcasters do, then it's not going to be the same kind of situation. So Anybody can do it. Look, listen, we could even start a network and be a rah-rah network. But you and I never wanted to do that. We just wanted the freedom to just say whatever we want, however we wanted it, irregardless. Now, does it make it funny when you walk into a locker room after you've written a piece that's not too flattering? Look, you got to be a man and stand up. And I have no problem defending myself if they ask me why I wrote it. I say strictly business. Watch the film. And some of the information, wink, wink, is not coming. I don't just a little bit inside. When an article comes out about Jeff Okudah, a random column on a Saturday, it doesn't just show up there for any reason, knowing that potentially he's going to have surgery. So it's wink, wink. People talk. It's not a hard thing to, when you're in the media, establish a relationship. You see somebody, hey, what's going on? You have conversations, wink, wink. You know certain things, and you roll with certain things and you don't. So it's not like information doesn't get filtered to Sports Illustrated and the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We have a massive following. People understand. So information seems to kind of flow in a way where if Jeff Okudah is going to have surgery, potentially there might be a Jeff Okudah column to go along with it. Wink, wink. Okay? So it's one of those things in the media where you can kind of defend yourself if you have a thing, because it's not just based on uninformed opinion. People talk. We know high school coaches. We know coaches. We talk football. We've had guests on. We've had people. We have a scout that writes for SI. He looks at things and can direct us to people that actually know more than we do. So we're not doing this off the top of we're not winging it. We don't get to be the Detroit Sports Podcast Network for 7 years by winging it. So that's part of it. But I never wanted to be a partner. I don't want to be a partner with the Lions. The Lions are great. They took my money. I was a season ticket holder, but I didn't want to be a partner in that realm. I just wanted to cover the team as objectively and to say and do whatever I want. And so with that, I'm blessed. We're blessed to cover the Lions in a journalistically objective way without having that partner relationship. And I think it's great. And I'm happy to cover the team. But for Chris Spielman, look, man, he knew what he was doing. He wanted to do it. And I don't blame him any bit for shilling for the Lions. Not one bit.
And I don't even think it's so much him shilling for the Lions. I think
he was shilling, bro. He was shilling. Look at the comments.
It's more him doing his role. But go back and watch any national broadcast, right? You could watch this past week's game with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. It was the Tampa Bay game, and you could go back and watch that game. There are points in that where even Joe Buck says certain things like, local fans say this and that about us. You can't bag on the teams that are playing. Usually what happens is that when a team gets down, the announcers will try to keep you engaged in what is going on, keep you engaged in the program. This is a trick that they do. Keep you engaged with the programming. So what they'll do is they will talk about all the good things that the team has going on for them and why this is just a really off day for some odd reason. And then next thing you know, Minnesota comes back and they put up a couple points and all of a sudden it's a one-score ball game. And they're like, okay, here we go. And then the tenor of the conversation goes to something a little bit more unbiased. And then what'll happen is Tampa Bay will come right back and put up 10 more points. And all of a sudden it switches more to fluffing Minnesota as they're trying to figure things out. That's how it works. That is how they keep you engaged. And if you don't think that Chris Spielman isn't a person like Troy Aikman or like Joe Buck, who is at certain times having to fluff the team because they're getting annihilated, then you just haven't been watching enough football with the Detroit Lions. Because, I don't know, this season alone, they've been annihilated quite a bit. And when they're not getting annihilated, they tend to fluff the other guys. Or they talk about how good the Detroit Lions are doing, executing something, which is totally different than they've done in the previous 3 games that they've watched. It's how it works, man. I get that people get upset, oh, yeah, he said Jelani Tavai is good. And we all know Jelani Tavai is not good. He's not good. He just can't cover. He's just not a good. He should be playing he should be a 4-3 edge is what he probably should be, because the guy has 0 coverage skills. Put him on the side and just let him rush. That's it. It's what he brings to the table.
So what'd you think of the memo that was released in regards to Sheila Ford Hamp and the Lions search, talking about experience and how they kind of want somebody in the role of GM and head coach? Now, Rod Wood was asked that question. He said that, look, they want the best person for the job, but I do think in line with experience, I think the general manager is where that is going to play the biggest part. You can't have somebody assembling a team, a culture, bringing people in that hasn't done it before. Now, that I think brings to the table Jerry Reese, the likes of the former general manager of the Atlanta Falcons and things like that, and the Houston Texans. Dimitroff. And so it brings, I think that opens up the door for a lot more experience in regards to the general manager position. I think that's where it counts. I think general manager who's done it before, had success, maybe at the ultimate level, I think is going to play a big part. But remember, Chris Spielman has a brother who's a general manager, so there's going to be things that he can surmise that can aid in this search. But it's absolutely fair. Experience matters. That's the one thing that the Lions have not had is somebody that's actually had a ring that's built a team, and I think that's very fair. So that's why Jerry Reese is appealing. That's why I think it kind of excludes John Dorsey, even though he's kind of put together some strong teams. But I think Jerry Reese has a real strong opportunity if he can really highlight the fact that, hey, I put together that team with the New York Giants, and we won not one but 2 Super Bowls. That's a strong selling point. And I like the memo. I don't think there's anything out of bounds with it. I have a good feeling that this hire is going to be okay. Does it guarantee championship success? I think we're at the ground floor of at least some playoff success. And maybe the next administration after, maybe this good GM hires a coach, maybe he's not kind of takes it to the next level and building up. And then you bring in the guy that's the coach. And then you bring in the guy that was the coach of a Super Bowl winning team that's hot and things like that. But I think we're starting at the ground floor of something that has the potential to be good, and experience matters.
I think the one thing to take out of the internal memo that was leaked was, and I think you're right, as far as experience goes, I don't think experience necessarily plays a major part in the head coach. I think the experience plays a part with the GM. If the GM comes in and, like you said, is well versed in laying down a culture, or is understands how to lead and how to bring in the right people and how to develop the right people, I don't think the coach is going to necessarily make a ton of difference as long as they're of the same mindset. And most of these GMs usually have a list, 5 to 10 guys deep, of guys that they want to work with because they've worked with them either in the past or they have interactions with them and they understand what they bring to the table. And they understand how they can help better balance what they do. So I think it's more important to probably get the GM right than to get the coach right now. But that being said, they go hand in hand. And I think the biggest thing that I took out of the memo was more the timeline that she's working with. It sounds like the front office is dead set on getting this pick in roughly 6 weeks. So that puts us basically right after the Super Bowl, which is fine because that's basically when everything's got to get kind of revved up and you got to start game planning and start looking at film for the draft. And you really got to kind of get going here. The NFL really never takes a day off. So I get that you want to get your general manager in place basically after the Super Bowl and then allow him to build his staff, allow him to go get his head coach, and then sit down and start breaking down film for the draft. But I also don't want you to rush it. I want you to get it right. And I think my concern is 6 weeks for a front office that is basically doing this for the first time. Now, I know Rod Wood, this is his second time around, and I know Sheila was kind of there a little bit when they hired Bob Quinn, but is this enough time for a group, a front office that hasn't really made these moves or had to basically carry the weight of making these moves all by themselves before? And I think that might be a little bit accelerated for this group. And I don't know if it's actually going to be enough time for them to be able to get it right. And that's, again, my concern is just getting it right, doing it properly. I think that's why it's a good idea to bring in guys like Chris Spielman, bring in a guy like Mark Hollis, bring in a guy like Barry Sanders. I'm not really sure what Barry Sanders is going to really impart. I mean, look, I feel like Barry Sanders is one of those guys he's a great face for the organization. I don't know if Barry Sanders adds a ton of football credibility as far as knowledge goes to really anything else. Chris Spielman's a guy, like I said, he's in a little bit of a different role. He has been there. He's done that. He watches a ton of football. He's been around the league doing different things with Fox. His brother's a GM. He's got all kinds of different ties. Mark Hollis is another guy, athletic director at Michigan State. Knows what it takes to hire good leaders and hire good people to put them in position to be able to make change and help winning programs. So I like those additions. I don't know what Barry Sanders necessarily brings to this. So listening and putting a little bit more weight on those two guys, I think is okay. But at the same time, 6 weeks might be a little bit too quick. And I just want it right, man. I just want it right. And I think you're right. If things fall appropriately, we could be in a situation where the next head coach comes in look, there's a lot of work to do because this roster is not good. This roster is light years behind where it really should be because of everything that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have done to it and how they've basically tore it down and sent off good players. You could be looking at maybe a 6-10 first season, depending on what they're able to accumulate in draft picks. Maybe 7-9. I mean, look, we're just kind of projecting a little bit too far ahead, I think, but it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be a process. And you just have to, as a Detroit Lions fan, you got to get ready for this process again.
Absolutely. It's a rebuild. And I think the expectation now is, okay, it's a rebuild. Get this done. Don't jerk around anymore. Let's take it seriously. Let's get to the point where you build a football team in a likeness that people are proud of. Not a team that quits or wilts or doesn't have talent or a certain way. Just a good football team with solid talent that has the ability to go out and win a bunch of games. And it starts. I think that it's going to start. I have a good feeling that, okay, it's a new era. Things are changing, and now we just got to be patient that this is, the next wave of the Detroit Lions growth. And I hope, and everybody that's watching is going to sit back and wonder, is Chris Spielman the man to lead the charge? I hope he is, but he said it himself. No guarantees, but he gives him a chance. He's a football voice and a football mind, and at least that's the right direction. And if it's not, then Sheila's daughter will then go out and find the next voice and assistant that's actually won something and won a ring and won at the highest level from the organizations that win, the Niners or the Chiefs or the Seahawks and things like that. So there's still an opportunity to assemble one of the greatest all-time coaching staffs, I think, of all time. Saleh head coach, LaFleur offensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. But bro, you branch off 2 head coaches right there. Boom, you win it. Boom, you send off Quinn back to another job. If Quinn can actually hold a 25-3 lead and call the right plays and figure out how to do it, you were there. You were right in that moment. You saw it. LaFleur has the blood in him. His brother is the head coach of Green Bay who's lighting it up. Saleh understands what's going on, been to the Super Bowl. There's an opportunity to assemble a really solid working coaching staff with a general manager like Jerry Reese picking players. Start picking some defensive players, some great, really good quarterback that can get some wins and has the it factor. It's there. The hope is there. And with Patricia and Quinn, it started to get hopeless. And so now, hope is back, baby. Hope and fear. But now the hope is back. And trust us, we know. Thank you for messaging us. I appreciate those that are skeptical and those that say, look, if the Fords are doing anything, hiring Spielman, hell, if they hire Bieniemy, it's wrong. If they hire this guy because they think it's wrong, I love it. Keep messaging us at Detroit Podcast. The banter is so sweet. Now, cuz, I don't know if you, in talking about the Pistons here and switching gears, I'm curious, did you see that report? I think on ESPN, and some people have questioned the respectability of that report in terms of some executives have come out and said that the Pistons had one of the worst off seasons in terms of, looking at how they let go of Christian Wood and the direction is questionable. I started to read some critiques a little bit, and they do make sense in that you've kind of put together a really young roster that's heavily focused on centers, and you realize, okay, the talent isn't exactly there. You might have, based on what we saw, passed on a productive player in Obi Toppin. So some critiques have surfaced in regards to the Pistons. But at the very least, it looks like there's a vision and a new way of looking at things and saying, hey, whoever that mix was, we don't want to pay it. And I think, you can't say it, but the Pistons are in tank mode. They're putting out a young lineup that everybody knows is going to lose. You've stockpiled picks. No GM's going to be like, we are just going to go out there and lose a bunch of games. But what you do is you do what Troy Weaver's doing, and that's how you tank on the down low, is you say, we want to be competing, we want to grow these young players together. But when you're starting a 19-year-old point guard in a preseason game, what does that signal to you? It's a tank, guys. Relax. Judge Troy Weaver on the picks he makes with the additional draft capital that he acquires. I think so far the ones that he's made have been okay. I understand, though, the first sign of concern, some of his free agent moves, a little bit head-scratching.
But again, I think there's a formula here, right?
Yes.
You're tanking.
Yes.
So you brought guys in. You didn't really pay anybody a buttload of money.
Right.
Nobody really has a contract that you can't really get out from underneath. I think the way this sets up is this team's not going to be good this year. And I don't think he has any anticipation of this team being good. But what I think it sets up for is for this team to really take a huge step forward in year 3. So year 2 to 3, year 3 to 4, I think this team really hits its stride. It's a rebuild. It's just like with Steve Eisman doing what he's doing with the Red Wings. Red Wings aren't going to be any good this year.
Right.
Red Wings won't be good for probably another 3 or 4 years. Same thing with the Pistons. All right. This is all about accumulating draft capital, and it's all about getting pieces in here. If you could get 1 or 2 guys that stick around on this roster over the course of the next 4 years, and they're an actual contributor to this roster in a major way. So if Killian Hayes is like that guy, that's pretty fantastic, right? That works really, really well, right? And you can then build around that guy, and then you can add other pieces in, and then you can add a couple other guys in. And by the time you hit that stride for year 4, you bring in that 1 or 2 free agents, or you make that trade, the 1 or the 2 trades that you have to make to bring in a guy. I mean, you don't have to go that far back. Go back to that 2003 season, 2004 season, when they made a trade for Rasheed Wallace. You know, he was the guy, he was the catalyst for that Detroit Pistons team that helped them win a championship. And I think that's kind of what you're doing here. You're building with young guys through the draft. Hopefully they all come together and are at the same time. And then what you're going to get is a team that's going to be competitive down the road. They're going to suck this year. The hope is that they can just be entertaining, and we can have some entertaining basketball while they blow and while they're at the bottom of the league. And I think that's what we all want right now. Like, be bad. Please be bad.
Be bad. Yes, exactly.
I mean,
have the growing pains.
But look at a team like the 76ers, right? 76ers are a pretty solid team. And I'm not saying tank the way they tanked. Like, they openly tanked. This has to be a little bit more covert because there are things in place now where you're not allowed to do what the 76ers did. But the 76ers went about it with, hey, we're going to go with a buckshot approach. We're going to try to accumulate as much draft capital as possible, as many high-end picks as possible, and then we're just going to try to take the players that we feel are the best. And hopefully we get 1 or 2 guys out of there, and we can build our team that way. And that's essentially what they've done. And now you've got guys like James Harden, who's like, hey, I want to go to Philadelphia. I want to go play for the 76ers. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were the Detroit Pistons and you did that, and you're in that position where whoever the big name free agent at that time, we'll say Kevin Durant, he's a little bit older, but Kevin Durant's still a top 5 player in the league, says, hey, you know what? I want to go to Detroit because they're on the verge of winning and I can put them over the top, trade me. You would be ecstatic if you're a Detroit fan, and that's what you're hoping for. That's what you have to trust the process to do for you, and that's where it's at. We're in trusting the process mode.
Now, the funny part was, and I saw it on the rundown because when you see the headline, Lavar Ball calls Pistons raggedy, it's because his son got cut, didn't play a minute, was a healthy scratch in two ball games there. And they took a look. They honored him because he worked hard and things like that, but he just isn't there. So to see that comment was funny, but I think that based on what Lavar has said in the past, I think that he kind of was light on the Pistons. I think that he could have even went further and really took them to task and say, hey, this is a rebuilding group that they don't like each other, and Troy Weaver's a con man, and he could have really said some things. But it's, one of those things where a guy, when he said like 200 controversial things, the 201st thing that he says, you just kind of chuckle at. I would have liked it if he would have actually said more, but it's okay. Look, this is an individual that's classic in his own self-promotion, says outrageous things because people print it, and he recognized how to play the media. You say outrageous things, you give quotes, people write about it, you keep your name in the media. But the Lakers did win, and he said, hey, once you traded my son, high draft pick, they're never going to win. What'd they do? They won. So it kind of delegitimizes your game there, but it's cute. It's nice to see Lavar Ball continue to stick up for his kids. It's a great, interesting story, that man, and how he, maneuvered his way into the sports consciousness of America. But at this point in time, it's the law of diminishing return in my eyes. It's funny. The Pistons aren't raggedy. Everyone was really impressed with Troy Weaver and what he's done. And there's a nucleus, there's a growth, there's things that you can hang your hat on as to what the Pistons are doing. And the next thing they need, and when the time is right in 3 years, they need that superstar. That's all. They're building the role players. They're building the foundational pieces. They're building their 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options. You have to always, with one of these picks, get the guy. You only need one. That's the key. And Troy Weaver knows it because he's seen it. So now you're building out 2 through 15, and you're going out from there. For Lavar Ball, keep on, man. I like it. The more you say, people write about it. I love seeing the word raggedy. It's a great kind of description right now of the Pistons, but it's not going to be that way for a long time. Very funny guy. I wish, I was kind of hoping. I was like, okay, if this kid makes this team out of training camp and he stays, we're going to have to get this guy on the air and figure out how to get some things said, because he'll openly talk about things. He'll talk about the organization. He'll talk about the history of the NBA. He'll just start saying, I could take Isaiah Thomas one-on-one. Easy, no problem. I could drop 20 on Isaiah. It would have been great. But it's not going to happen, and I think the Pistons probably made the right move moving on.
Yeah, I think so too. He really just sounds like he's a scorned father here.
Yeah.
And it's weird, right? So he's got 3 kids who are all really exceptional basketball players, and LaMelo might be the best one. I was watching some of the Hornets game the other day, and I just feel like he's got a weird release with his shot. But all that being said, he scores, and he can move with the ball, and he can help set up and create. It's weird that LaMelo might be the best out of the 3 brothers. LiAngelo, I don't know. I thought it was one of those things where you bring a guy in, see what he has, see if he can contribute and add anything to your team. And in this case, the Pistons felt like he couldn't. So you know what? You move on, and Lavar is just being Lavar. And I think that's all that it is. I don't think this organization is raggedy. I think this organization was raggedy. I think with what Troy Weaver has come in and done, he has said, hey, we've got a vision, we've got a foundation, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick to what we know. We're going to do what we need to do. And I think as a Pistons fan, you should be excited. You should, look, they're not, again, I'm just going to reiterate what I said a few minutes ago. They're not going to be good this year, and that's okay. You're looking for the return in a couple of years. And I think that's where this organization is headed. And I think that's where this organization is going. I think that's what they're going to end up doing. And LiAngelo just didn't fit into that. And Lavar can be bitter and sour about it. I think maybe LiAngelo needs to maybe go overseas or maybe go to the D-League. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Always enjoy breaking down Detroit sports, man. It's been a fun year. Man, a different year. We spent a good 9 months recording in a remote situation, and you guys have stuck with us, still continue to download, and I appreciate it. All you got to do, go to anywhere your favorite podcast is located, type in these 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast, and our daily content will find you. Make sure to follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Make sure to check out his Practice Squad podcast. Really fun, entertaining time with Brendan Riley. If anything that you've heard today, you just feel like rubbed you the wrong way, hit us up at Detroit Podcast. Good review, bad review, we read it all. It's a fun way to interact in the world of sports, and you guys have put us right here in the sports scene now for the past 7 years, and we're grateful for it. And also check out the work of Noah Tuluki. Adam's protege there is getting some good guests, telling some good stories. Ex-Detroit Lions are regularly appearing on the Open Mic Night podcast that comes out on Tuesday. It's a good listen. It's good stories. The latest guest, Jim Arnold, tells some fun stories about being a punter, playing for the Lions, and some thoughts in regards to the Lions' future. So make sure you check out Open Mic Night as well. Thanks, cuz. Good podcast.
Absolutely. Check out Noah's work. He does a great job.